Hi and welcome to Rosebud Homestead. I'm just home from work and guess what? Our beets are ready to harvest. They're all different sizes, I just know it. And I am not an experienced beet grower. I've grown them a couple of times and I grew them experimentally this year. I'll explain that in just a minute when we go outside. But we are going to preserve these beets. Until I know about how many we have and about the volume of it, I'm not exactly sure. I want to can some, I want to dehydrate some, and the ones that I dehydrate we're going to powder, and so we'll figure that out. This video is all about emergency preparedness and food security and self-reliance. Self-reliance because we grew these beets ourselves, so that was really good. Food security is because we're going to preserve it in several different ways for use in times of emergencies. And we like to rotate through our food instead of putting it out there on the shelf and waiting for a zillion years before we go out and try it out. So we do a rotation, and I'll be explaining that in a different video. And then emergency preparedness, we want to have food to eat in case of emergency. So let's go outside and pick some beets, and when I come back, I will have changed out of my work clothes into some clothes that I can work with beets in because I'm going to be getting beet juice on me. So see you out there in just a moment. So this is our little experiment that we started, I think, last February, where I wanted to see what it would be like to have an extra high raised bed, and it has turned out beautifully. We had peas and I planted beets. We've had spinach and harvested a lot. These are the beets. And so I'm going to just start pulling them up. And big one. I'm just going to put them in this basket. And we've got some volunteer peas from this spring. I'm going to try not to pull those up. So I have them in all sizes. I know I planted them too close together, but that's just the way they were. So we're going to get these in the house in just a minute. And I'll finish pulling all of these. Let's see what these other varieties look like. A little bit smaller, but still good size. All right, so I'm going to finish picking these, and then I'll meet you back in the house. Ooh, it's good to get out of that heat. It's about 102 outside. And so a couple of days ago, I harvested some of the beets just to do a trial run. And I harvested anything that was red, and or cut everything that was red, like the stems and the leaves to the bull's blood beets, and put them on one of my dehydrating trays. And then the green leaves I put on another. So I wanted to dry them separately because I'm going to be making powder, and I want the powder to be red, and then I'll do a separate powder for the leaves. And so this is what it's going to look like after we've dehydrated them. But for right now, we can't even think about that because we're not nearly ready there yet. What I'm going to do is pull these beets out one at a time. And I'm going to cut the leaves off the stems, and I'm going to do it about an inch from the beet. And the leaves are going in the sink. I'm going to be washing those, and then we'll dehydrate them. And then I'm cutting about an inch down. And so that's the way the beet looks. The reason we want to leave about an inch here and about an inch here is we don't want this beet to bleed all over the water. It's going to anyway, but it won't bleed, and of course it's not real blood. But we don't want it to bleed as much as it would if we cut real close. So I'm just going to drop them. I've got cold water in there, and then I'm going to wash them and get them ready for the next step. And the next step is I'm going to be putting them in this pan after I wash and clean them. I'm going to put them in this pan, and I'm going to boil them for between 20 and 40 minutes. And then that will allow us, the skin will be loose then, and I'll be able to just peel the skin right off. And then we'll have a better idea of how many beets we have and then what we're going to do with them. So I'm going to come back after I finish this messy chore and after the beets have been boiled for enough time that we can get those skins off. So I will see you probably in about an hour. Beets are a lot of work, and that's why I don't do them except for about every 5 years. And this is the best harvest I've ever had with beets because I've never planted very many in the first place. But this is exciting. I've added a layer this time because I'm going to be doing some dehydrating and powdering. So I'm about ready to get these in the dehydrator, and I want to show you what I've got. So we'll start right over here. These are the leaves of the Detroit beets. And then these are the leaves of the bull's blood, and they are very red. And then these are the stems from both. So you notice that I am keeping the colors separate because I do want to get as red a veggie powder as I possibly can. So we'll be powdering the red results separate from the green results. The beets, oh my gosh, they're boiling over. The beets are still boiling over here, boiling away. They won't be ready for probably another 20 minutes, so we'll come back when they are ready. I pulled the beets out of the pan, and they have boiled enough that the skins are loose, most of the skins. And I have completed 1 pint of the smaller beets, and they can stay whole. And then I have a pint of sliced beets. I'm working on my second jar of sliced beets. The beets are still warm, but they're not so hot that I can't handle them. And so when I take one out of this dish, I just cut the tops off. I cut the bottom off. This is a bull's blood beet. You can see how dark red it is. And the skins on the bull's blood are pulling off better than the ones on the Detroit beets. And so I just pull all the skin off, and I'm just slicing these. These are the more medium-sized, and they are very dark. And I just drop them in the jar. So here's another one. Bottom and then top, and into my scrap pot. And then I just wiggle my fingers across the skin, and sometimes it comes off and sometimes it doesn't. Sometimes I have to take a paring knife and give it a little, well, this isn't not a paring knife, but it's the knife I use, and give them a little hurry up and get off this beet, you skin. So you do whatever you have to do to get the skin off, and I'll tell you, some are easier than others. And then just slice. This is another bull's blood, and so I'm going to put these in the jar, and I'm going to keep filling the jars, and when I get all 4 jars filled, I'll show you what comes next. So I'm done, and we have 5 beets left, and I almost wonder if it's worth dehydrating these. Jim and I might just finish cooking these off, peeling them and cooking them, and we just might have them for supper tonight. So I'm going to set those aside. The next step here is this is hot pack, and that's the only choice you have with beets, which means the beets should be warm, and then we put hot water in. You can also add salt if you want. I don't add salt. Now, you could also, these are just plain beets. We love beets, but I love them plain. I do not want to pickle them ahead of time. If I pickle them, I do it after I open them up, and then it's just a simple little recipe that my mother taught us. So we have headspace, checking for air bubbles. Wipe the rim, and the lid, and the ring. Finger tight. So I am going to be using my Instant Pot Max to can these 4 pints. That's exactly what it will hold, is 4 pints. And I am completely confident that for me, for this elevation, The Instant Pot Max is very safe. We're at 5,000 feet. I have tested and tested and tested this machine with a high precision scientific instrument that is known as a data logger. It is a little tiny computer about this size that fits down inside the jar in the middle of the food, and it tracks the temperature of the food throughout the whole processing time. And I have a set of algorithms that I use to then compare the temperature record with what is industry standard. And with every test that I have done with the Max, when I have pushed the right button on the front that says canning, it has surpassed the safety standard. So I have no qualms at all about using that for canning low acid food. Had several questions lately, don't you have to put water in the canner? And you absolutely have to put water in every pressure canner, even these electric ones. I did that before the video started. And the water is halfway up the jars, which is exactly what the instructions on this canner say. And I have a rack on the bottom, so those jars are not sitting on the bottom. I'm going to hit canning, and the pressure that I want is the high pressure, which is right here. So I'm turning that up to 30. And that is USDA recommended processing time. Okay, so I have everything else set. It is a natural release. It has to be a natural release. Don't speed that release because we want those beets to be up in the kill zone for botulism for a long enough time. And now I'm just going to say start, and it is on. The temperature on the inside of the canner right now is 87 degrees. It will heat up and heat up. It will not start processing until it has reached a high enough temperature, and then the 30 minutes will start. And sometime during that 30 minutes, the temperature inside the food, where inside the jars where the food is, will reach the kill zone, which is between 240 and 250 Fahrenheit, or between 115 and 121 Celsius. And then it will hold at that temperature for long enough time that it meets the industry standards. In fact, every batch that I did with this, with my testing, it exceeded the industry standards. So there was a huge safety margin. So we will come back when these are ready to come out of the canner. Okay, as you can see on the screen, it has been cooling down for more than an hour and a half. And it's likely that it was done maybe 15 minutes ago, because that's how long it has been since I walked through the kitchen to check it, and it still wasn't ready to open. But now it is, and so we're going to check them. So here we go. All right, there's one. So this worked out just fine. I was checking the temperature as I walked through the kitchen numerous times. The temperature got well up into the kill zone and matching my previous data for other batches as well. So I know that these are safely canned. And some of them have already popped, so that's great as well. The dehydrator is still going. The house is smelling like drying beets. And so we'll come back in the morning and take a look at that. They should be done first thing in the morning. Good morning. I'm so thrilled to report that it's going to be cooler today. It was 102 yesterday. Today it's only going to be 99. So maybe fall is in the air. The leaves in the dehydrator from the beets were done by morning. It took them about 8 hours. These are the stems. It has taken them probably about 15 hours, so they were a little more dense. I've already powdered the 2 sets of leaves, whole dehydrator full of leaves. And I have 6 trays in my dehydrator, so this included not only well, except for these 2 that we're going to do and put it in this jar. This included 4 trays of leaves from overnight, and then the other couple of trays that I did in my experiment. So it powders down, dehydrates and powders down to a very small amount. Isn't that amazing? And of course, I always do the twist test to be sure that the powder rolls freely, which means that it is dry enough, there's no moisture in here. These were the leaves for the bull's blood. I had only 2 trays of those leaves, but I have these stems. I did these off camera because those were easy, and I've done plenty of other things, dehydrating, showing that type of thing. But I wanted to just bring you back to show you so that we could do these stems together. So I'm going to get both trays right here in the blender. And after I do things, not after every batch, but when these little plastic inserts begin to show some staining like they do with the beets, I just put them in a sink of Clorox water for about 5 minutes, and they come completely clean and look as good as new. I have the underside of my lid lined with just some plastic wrap. That was a tip from one of our viewers, which has just been marvelous. So here we go with these stems. It takes them just a bit longer than it takes the leaves. And so of course for this, the beet powder is so nutritious, good source of vitamin K, good for blood pressure, fiber, heart health. I have my master list up there so that I remember what the advantages of all of these veggie powders are. And of course, they can go for flavoring things like pasta or in meatloaf. A lot of people said they use their veggie powders for meatloaf, and this came completely clean, so that is good. And so I have the beet top powder, both green and it's more purple than red. These can also be used for making soup. So look at the difference in color between the leaves and the stems. Leaves much darker, the stems much lighter. So let's just mix that together and see what it turns out to be. Oh, very nice color, kind of purpley. So lots of things to use these veggie powders for. And then 4 pints of the pressure canned beets. This was a very small crop. It was a test crop. I wanted to see how well they did in a raised bed, and they did better than any beets I've been able to grow out here on the ground. So we'll be planting more beets next year. Meanwhile, I hope you enjoyed this video, and we will see you soon with our next one.